Welcome back to the Dreamhack Denver Regional Championships. We are about to get into round 3 here with our feature match of Harlan Fear on Rakdos Shadow against Nathan Andrus on Azorius Control. These are a couple of interesting decks. Mason, what are your thoughts on this Shadow list?
So I really like Harlan's Rakdos Shadow deck. This is one that he's been doing really well with, placing highly in a lot of tournaments recently, and it's in a very aggressive deck. This is not like Rakdos Evoke. If you notice, there's no Fable of the Mirror Breakers here in our deck. We are low to the ground. We are the aggressor here from Harlan Fear, and it's going to put him in a position to really clock people where the Rakdos Evoke deck kind of does that, but tries to play a grindy game. Harlan is about killing his opponents.
Sure, and then on Nathan Andrus' side, we have this Azorius Control list, which I think is going to be very interesting to see up against a aggressive deck like that Death Shadow list. What do you think here?
Yeah, this is sort of the exact opposite. Nathan is trying to take the game nice and slow. It's going to just one for one use things like the One Ring to really, out card advantage the opponent. And then we're trying to combine Narset Parter Veils with Days Undoing to strip our opponent of all our cards as sort of a cheeky way to win games or maybe lock things up in the mid game. So, sort of polar opposites here going into the match.
Yeah, well, we are in round 3. Both of our players are 2-0 records, and I am excited to get into this match, Mason, and see how it's going to play out as we kick things off right now. Looks like our players are looking at their hands, maybe still resolving mulligans. Quite a hand it looks like from Harlan there, though. We've got a Dothy, we've got a Ragavan, we've got a Grief.
Only thing Harlan want more is a Not Dead After All to really get that Grief Scam, which his deck is playing.
Of course, of course. And Nathan, it looks like, took a mulligan down to 6. And looks like Harlan is on the play here. Fetch shocking out this Blood Crypt. And we know he's got creatures to play with that.
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to see which threat Harlan wants to lead with here. Ragavan is a really tempting one, but Stalactite Stalker here grows by using the fetch land and also baits out some of the removal, and Nathan knows he's playing it against an aggressive deck.
Right, and we're going to go over to Nathan now, who's going to preordain card recently unbanned for Modern. And he's going to go ahead and draw his card there and pass back to Harlan.
Got a nice shot of these sleek, heavy play mats, our sponsor for coverage this weekend. You can pick up their stuff using the code in the corner of your screen.
That's right. That code is Denver 2024 for 10% off heavy play products. And it looks like we are going to see a Grief come down for Harlan. And we're going to get a good look at Nathan's hand here. And we are going to have the Not Dead After All for the Grief. Huge for Harlan. Gonna leave Nathan with nothing but lands in hand.
Yeah, Nathan does have some utility lands in Gaia Reach Sanitarium and the Ketria Triome, but Harlan has a big clock on the board, and that Stalactite Stalker is going to grow because we did descend this turn.
Descended multiple times even, as he fetches for a Blood Crypt that he's going to go ahead and shock in, it looks like. And we're going to see that Ragavan come down as Harlan just plays all the cards in his hand.
Yeah, I was curious to see how Harlan wanted to play that, if he wanted to play around counter spells or not. This plays into a Wrath, but the Wrath can't happen until turn 4, and Harlan looks to have lethal lined up before that at the current pace.
Yeah, and just as you said, this deck is aggressive, and we are clearly seeing that as a Teferi is going to come up off the top of Nathan's deck for this Ragavan trigger, and Harlan's just going to pass.
Yeah, Harlan might not be able to cast that one, but pretty happy to not have it come down and just, undo the work we've done on this Stalactite Stalker or Grief.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we see a Leyline Binding in hand for Nathan, which can help stop the bleeding here a bit, but at this point, Harlan's board is so big, and the Stalactite Stalker growing like almost every turn. It's powerful.
Yeah. Harlan has Nathan in an awkward spot here.
An NT for Harlan. Incredible creature. Newer to Modern, newer to Magic. It looks like we're going to see him swing out. And we're just thinking about the NT trigger here.
Like this from Harlan. NT is a way to push some damage, but also just knows that Terminate probably won't matter too much. And it's much more important to be like, hey, if my opponent has some interactions, they don't die here. I just want to push more damage and just try to put Nathan on the back foot.
Yeah, and he is going to get a Thoughtseize off of the NT trigger. Could play that after combat if he wanted. But we are going to see Nathan fetch out a Triome. Might be seeing that ley line come down.
Yeah, and the Wicked Roll token kind of huge here. Nathan at 8. So if we take this grief down, we're going to fall to 7, and we're going to take 6, excuse me, from the creatures.
That's right, yeah. And Nathan down to 1 life. Not the spot you want to be, especially when your opponent has all these treasures, is able to cast Thoughtseize, get rid of the only non-land card. All game long, it just feels like Harlan leaving Nathan with nothing but lands and taking such firm control of the game so quickly.
Yeah, I really love Harlan's deck. It is about kind of leveraging what is the Rakdos colors good at. We're good at applying quick pressure and putting our opponent on the back foot. Why don't I lean into that more? One of the things that was nice about Fury was you had another 1-mana play. So Stalactite Stalker lets you get that early damage in and can always be a buyout as a removal spell later in the game. So Harlan's build of the deck, very innovative, very good at sort of doing what the Rakdos is good at, and it was exciting to see it kind of play out there.
It was very exciting, and I'm very excited to see how the next game is going to go against these two players, which we're going to get into right away. This time, Nathan is going to be on the play, and it looks like we've got a One Ring, a Solitude. I mean, definitely some options. Definitely hoping he does not face the wrath of the double grief turn 1.
Exactly. And Harlan's deck is really weak to Solitude at certain points. If you ever get 2 Death Shadows in play, the 2 Death Shadows will both always die to the Solitude because the Solitude will gain you enough life off the Shadow to get back to 13, and then Stay Space actions will kill the other Shadow. So you're not going to see Harlan probably put double Death Shadow in play unless he is really thinking that it's his only way to win is to basically say call on Solitude.
Sure, absolutely. And we are going to see the Ragavan come out for Harlan here, which is a creature that no matter what demands respect when you see it come out against you. It looks like we're going over to Nathan, and we can see in his hand there a Leyline of the Void, I believe, which maybe he's hoping to use to answer this Ragavan. There is going to be a Thoughtseize, which Nathan is going to go ahead and fetch in response. Definitely wants to play his spells before they get Thoughtseized away.
Yeah. Get this binding down. Make sure the Ragavan doesn't connect.
All right, so there comes the binding. That's going to resolve. Ragavan's going to get exiled, and now the Thoughtseize will resolve. And a lot to choose from for Harlan. Not going to be able to leave Nathan with nothing but lands this time.
Yeah, and this is a really interesting position. And depending on how Harlan's hand is built, will probably tell you which way he wants to go. The thing that makes the most sense in the dark is just the One Ring. You want to sort of not prevent your opponent from recouping all the resources and buying a turn against you. But Harlan might have a card that lines up well against that in hand. Like he might have a couple Orcish Bowmasters or something. Looks like that's not the case, so he's just going to knock out the most powerful card.
All right, let's say we do see an NT and a Not Dead After All. A couple NTs, actually, for Harlan and a Bolt there. So definitely makes sense he would want to get rid of that One Ring early before it ever has a chance to hit the board.
Yeah, and Harlan's Crocs that we saw in hand too is going to be a really important tool if we can get to the point in the game where we're bringing that back. And, with Nathan seeming to have a lot of answer spells, it's pretty likely as long as he can dodge the Solitude on the Crocs.
Yeah, we are going to see Harlan here is going to fetch, shock a land. Looks like he is at 13 life presently. But we're going to see an NT come down. Which we really saw last game that NT can do quite a lot. And that's actually just going to get countered by Nathan, it seems.
Yeah, Harlan has a bit of a wombo combo in hand. We have a Street Wraith. So if we can get our NT down, we can cycle that for just 2 life and, draw a card off the Street Wraith and get a look at another card off the NT to try and develop there. So Nathan immediately counterspelling that to prevent something like that from occurring once again in his open deck list. And Nathan is aware this is something that could be happening to him.
Yeah, we're going to go back over to Nathan. He's going to get his 4th land down. Notably, Harlan only on 2 lands. But he is going to go ahead and buy his companion and pass back over to Harlan. Harlan's going to try once again to resolve an NT. And this time it looks like he's going to be successful.
No third land still there from Harlan. Picked up his 4th NT, though. So if you like that card, we're going to be seeing a lot of it.
Yeah, definitely no shortage of NTs for Harlan. Did pick up a Grief, though. We know he's got the Not Dead after all. He's going to go ahead and start with a Thoughtseize on Nathan, which is going to force out one of these plays early. There are 2 Solitudes in Nathan's hand.
Yeah, and that is going to be awkward for Harlan, but he is able to maybe force Nathan to do it at a time he doesn't want to.
All right, so he is going to go ahead and evoke the Grief, pitching the Kroxa. And Nathan thinking if he wants to go ahead and respond now. Looks like he is fetching a land out.
Yeah, looks to probably be hard casting the Solitude would be my guess here. That way you're still going to lose cards to the Grief, but you now have a blocker for the NT. The Grief doesn't get scammed on you. Oh, and it looks like Nathan, I like this actually a lot, is going to go after the NT and says, hey, you know what, Harlan, if you want to not dead after all that Grief, that's fine. I don't mind losing these cards.
Sure. Now, Harlan, as we know, has plenty of NTs to spare, so maybe isn't too upset about this, but is going to go ahead and get rid of a Lorien Revealed for Nathan, who is just going to draw another Lorien Revealed.
That was a very good draw. Harlan had got the game down to nothing with an NT and Grief. Now, Solitude is hard to race, but that was a devastating play there. And looks like Nathan has a lot going still.
Yeah, able to draw some cards, play a land, preordain, really just do a lot when it didn't look like he was going to have much of a turn after that double Grief. He's going to attack in with the Solitude, gain a little life. We're going to go back over to Harlan.
Yeah, and looks like Nathan does have a counterspell. Harlan with Bolt NT and a land in hand. I'm curious to see how Harlan wants to play this because there's a lot of different ways that you can take it here.
Right, he's going to go ahead and play another NT, attacking with the Grief, discard a Marsh Flats, hits a Bowmasters off of the NT trigger. No chance of playing that this turn, and is going to be stuck on 2 lands still as he passes back to Nathan.
Yeah, you can see a little bit of desperation there from Harlan, discarding the land when he has the Bolt for the Solitude. I think Harlan thought, if I have another land on top of my deck, I'm going to be in a bad spot even if I do answer the Solitude with Nathan topping twice throughout the preordain. So I need to make a play that lets me get out of this.
Right, and Harlan is going to go ahead and scoop up, which is going to bring us to a game number 3 between these decks.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for Harlan there, just kind of picking it up. Maybe he could battle for like another 10, 15 minutes and maybe win. But you can tell the writing's on the wall. He knows he's out of steam. He wants to give himself the most time to think for his future plays and just pick them on up.
Yeah, and we've talked about play draw in some of the other matches today. How important do you think it is for this match that Harlan is starting game 3 on the play?
I think it's pretty important. It's really important to remember that Harlan's deck is an aggro deck. It is trying to beat down. So having turn 1 Stalactite Stalker or Ragavan really is going to put the opponent on the back foot. And it sounds like Harlan and them are ready to go. So let's head back into the feature match area.
Yeah, we'll see if Harlan is able to have a explosive start here, get some creatures down. We do see a Not Dead After All in his hand as he is fetching. So if there's a Grief in there as well, this could be quite the opening turn as he shocks in a Blood Crypt.
That's about as explosive as they get is the turn 1 double Grief.
And there it is. And even pitching a Not Dead After All to do it. What a flex.
Yeah, if you're Nathan, you're hoping. Has the Stern Scolding, which is typically very good against Grief if you're on the play, but on the draw, not exactly what you're looking for.
Right, we're seeing Teferi, Stern Scolding, a Leyline Binding, and a counter spell with a couple of lands for Nathan.
Yeah. I would imagine Harlan for sure wants to get the Leyline Binding, simply because that is a card that actually removes the Grief from the board. And then everything else seems totally reasonable and depends a lot on his hand. There's even a world where Harlan has more discard spells and takes the other counter magic and that leaves the other ones. But it looks like he is just going to take that binding and then figure out exactly what to do.
He's gonna think very, very carefully about this one, as probably this decision is going to shape a lot of the next few turns of this game.
Yeah, and if you're Nathan, this is probably a pretty big tell that Harlan has some follow-up creature for the next turn. And so if you draw something like a Triumph, you might want to not play that on turn 1 and instead play the Island and Stern Scolding if he gives it to you. Because I think, given most hands, you would just take the Teferi because it will unsummon the Grief. So sort of a sign that Harlan has something going on there that he wants to play.
Right, so he does take the Stern Scolding. Nathan just plays a fetch land and passes. And Harlan is going to jump at the opportunity to get in for some damage with the Grief. I think I saw a Stalactite Stalker in his hand, but he is going to fetch out a land real quick, shock in that Blood Crypt.
I think we're going to get our little friend on the board.
There he is. And we did fetch this turn, which means we did descend. So he will get a counter once we get to the end of the turn. And it looks like that's happening right now. So Nathan is going to fetch as well, get a Triumph on board. And this feels like an ideal start for Harlan.
Yeah, Harlan has put Nathan on the back foot. Now, Nathan needs to just simply draw a land to get that Teferi to unsummon and could potentially stabilize, but Harlan's going to push a bunch of damage. And then Nathan's kind of on the back foot for the rest of the game and making it so the One Ring from his side might be a little bit worse of a card because the life cost could be higher.
Right, and we are seeing Nathan choose to play the Preordain instead of holding up for the counterspell, knowing how important this Teferi is.
Yeah, I like this a lot from Nathan. Just Harlan's on so few cards. Let me try and make sure that I can play this Teferi and unsummon this Grief and get the pressure off.
Sure, and we are going to see just a quick cycle from Harlan, and he's going to swing out with his creatures.
Yep.
And there's going to be another Descend, another counter on the Stalker, and we are back over to Nathan. Oh, it looks like he's going to ending the Stalker and then play a Triumph. Harlan knows Teferi is online next turn.
One good thing about this turn 4 Teferi from Nathan, if you're a Harlan Fear fan, is that with the Wicked Roll token getting bounced, it's going to do one more, and then Harlan's going to have a 3-2, which means if Nathan doesn't answer the 3-2 before it connects, we're going to be in a very awkward position of not being able to fetch until we gain some more life. So,
and we do see the fairy come down immediately on Nathan's turn. He's going to go ahead and bounce that grief, take the damage from the Wicked roll, taking him down to 4.
I love this from Harlan, by the way. We could have played our Swamp last turn, but if we do, maybe Nathan uses some different answer on our grief, and we want to redeploy it. So we just pass, make it look like we don't have anything. Maybe we don't, we just got a bunch of 4 mana cards in hand, and force Nathan to do that and kind of guarantee that, we're going to get this grief back on the board.
All right, and he fetches out the crypt, plays the Swamp, plays the grief. Gonna get another look at Nathan's hand with 2 more Teferis and a counter spell. He's going to go ahead and take the counter spell, leave Nathan with a hand full of Teferis.
Now, this is huge. Harlan has Lightning Bolt in hand and a Pithing Needle. So we might see Nathan do something like take up my Teferi, play a new Teferi, bounce this grief, that way I don't die. And, Harlan might be able to do something if he draws a land like play a grief, check the way, and then bolt you, or even evoke the grief if we draw a black card. Harlan, who has flooded this game, might be able to steal this one.
Right, and each point of damage here from the fetches to the Wicked roll could end up mattering quite a bit with Nathan at a very precarious 3 life. And as he said, he is going to play the second Teferi, bounce the grief, and looks like that might be it for Nathan. Not sure if he has another play here. He's just going to play a land and say go.
Harlan knows half the cards in Nathan's hand. And yeah, I think Harlan drew the fetch land. So as long as he has the 4th Blood Crypt in hand,
he's going to go ahead and fetch. Get a crypt. Bolt Nathan. That is going to be game for Harlan.
Yeah, and that was a really exciting game there. Harlan got on board early. Nathan, stabilized a little bit, and we were able to sneak that bolt across there. Every fetching decision mattered a lot there. Nathan trying to set up counter spells to draw potentially off the top, or maybe a Solitude by fetching a little early. Knew he was exposing himself to the 4 bolts. So great play on both sides there.
Yeah, absolutely great play on both sides. I mean, these are powerful players. I mean, just getting to 2-0 by round 3 of an event like this is an accomplishment. And we got to see some really exceptional play here. And, ultimately that aggressive Rakdos deck just ran over the game. But I think we are going to take a quick break, Mason, and then we're going to get back to some more Magic very quickly.
This is the Heavy Play Equip Mag system.
Players, we are in round 3 of the Dreamhack Denver Regional Championship. And for this round, Mason, it looks like we are going to have Jarrell Winston on Domain Zoo and Jody Keith on Mono White Martyr. What do you think about these decks?
So Domain Zoo is a deck I really, really like. Harlan's deck and Domain Zoo these are the 2 decks that if I wasn't playing Yogg, they'd be vying for my attention. And I think this deck is very powerful. It prevents a very fast clock very early, has Leyline of the Guild Pack for those fast, insane draws we see with stuff like Scion of Draco, where we just put our opponent on the back foot and overwhelm them immediately, and just plays a good Delver game plan of sort of, get one thing on the board, stop everything your opponent's doing, and push across his last point of damages. This deck is very exciting to me, and I think very well positioned going into this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, on the other side of the table here, Jody Keith's deck, Mono White Martyr. What are we seeing here, Mason?
So this is a control deck. Jody is looking to grind the game to just one for oneing and then use cards like the One Ring to take over. And instead of using counter spells and things like that, Jody's going to use things like Martyr of Sands to gain a lot of life to offset the One Ring and sort of put the opponent in a position where they can't really win. And if the game goes long enough, we're going to use a Myriad of the Sky Ruin to rebuy stuff like Martyr of Sands, like Comet of the False Hope, and sort of grind the game to a standstill. This is a deck Jody has played for a long time and is very proficient with.
Yeah, well, I am very excited to see these two players battle it out. Both players also 2-0 in the standings right now. And we're going to get straight into it with Jarrell Winston on the left here on Domain Zoo and Jody Keith on the right on his mono white Martyr deck. It looks like we are seeing in the opening hands a lot of lands and a ring here.
Wow. And Jarrell has the double 1-drop of Nicodle and Ragavan, and then Tribal Flames and Lightning Bolt to start things off.
Right, that is quite an opening hand for Jarrell here. It looks like he is on the draw, but we're going to see what he decides to play for turn one.
Yeah. And this is an interesting one, too, because it is open decklist, so Jarrell knows that Jody has a lot of answers. And we know that Jody actually has temporary lockdown in his main deck, which is going to be a back-breaking play against Jarrell if he decides to continue to play into the board.
Absolutely. And we're just going to plain cycle turn one here for Jody. It looks like Jody is using the curved sleeves from the sponsor of the stream, Heavy Play, which you can get 10% off of products like that if you use code Denver2024.
Martyr of Sands, this is a card that has not seen a ton of modern play recently. Used to be sort of a fringe archetype back in the day. Basically, with this card, if you haven't seen it before, we can sacrifice it and reveal a bunch of white cards from our hand, and every white card is 3 life. So that is actually very, very powerful when your opponent is playing things like Lightning Bolt and Tribal Flames to try and get the last couple points across, basically, countering those cards without actually countering them.
Right, so we are seeing it come down here. And, once again, we've got this very aggressive deck versus more controlling deck. But on the side of Jody, a lot of ways to gain life and stabilize and a lot of main deck answers for it. Very, very intrigued to see where this game is headed. Now, Jarrell does have the mana, if he so chooses, to dash in his Ragavan. But he's also got plenty of cards that can just answer this Martyr directly.
Yep. I think Jarrell's also just asking a clarifying question, like, do I get to see your whole hand? And it looks like Jody's telling him, no, I get to pick the cards that I show you. So you won't see everything. But if Jody has it his way, you'll see basically everything because he'll hopefully reveal 4 or 5 spells and gain, that 12 to 15 life.
Sure, and it looks like we are getting the judge involved just to make sure everyone's on the same page, knows how all of this works. Always just call a judge if any part of you is unsure about what's happening in the game.
Yeah. Interactions are weird sometimes too, and the way cards are templated, it can be a little confusing and different from card to card, especially with one like this that isn't, ubiquitous in the format.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just going to get this resolved real quick as our players are continuing to think about how they want to proceed in the game. It looks like the judge is presenting some Oracle text. Might have been a little hard to read under the signature on that card for Jody.
Yeah, well, the players doing this, I'm going to use code Denver2024 to get 10% off some Heavy Play products, our sponsor of the stream this weekend.
And it looks like Jarrell's going to attempt to bolt down the Martyr. And looks like Jody going to activate it in response.
Yeah, and this is big. Jody revealed Thraben Inspector, Temporary Lockdown, and Wrath of God, the OG, the one that we call Wraths 4, Wrath of God itself. So now Jarrell knows, I need to be kind of aware of what's going on here because Jody just gained a bunch of life. I knocked a little bit off of my Nakatl, but now I know there's a bunch of Wraths coming down for my creatures.
Yeah, and that is tough if you're on the side of Jarrell here, where, you know, almost everything he wants to play is going to get hit by that lockdown. And anything that doesn't can just as easily get hit by the Wrath.
I like this from Jody here. Lets him develop, play around cards like Ragavan really well. And if Jarrell wants to, commit more to the board, Jody's actually okay with just temporary lockdowning his own Thraben Inspector. And then if Jarrell wants to use something like Leyline Binding to get back his creatures, well, the lockdown will give back the Thraben Inspector as well. And we can sort of, get back to gumming up the board and sort of stalling for time. And that's something that Jody's deck does a lot of stalling. Looks like he's just going to take the block, though. Doesn't want to be a little cutesy there with a temporary lockdown.
Right, and looks like Jarrell thinking about playing something, decides not to, passes over to Jody. I really like this, not developing too far into these Wrath effects, just keeping his one creature on board.
Yep. Using Eagles of the North, find the Plains, play the Knight Errant, go find a Haywire Mite. That gives us an answer to the Leyline Binding. And remember, Jody is trying to work up to those 7 plains, in play for Mirror the Skyrune in the late game. And if Jody can get there, he is going to have sort of this inevitability engine online.
Yeah, and we're going to go back over to Jarrell's turn. Going to swing out with that Nakatl. And looks like Jody going to take the trade there. And a lot to think about for our players here as Jarrell plays a Brawler. But definitely an unenviable position for Jarrell to be in, facing down just a hand of answers from Jody Keith.
Yeah, and one thing to note is typically this Domain Zoo deck plays 4 Stun Denials in the main deck, which are very good in these kind of matchups where your opponent has these expensive non-creature spells. In order to kind of keep the burn and answer spells high, Jarrell decided to go down a little bit on Stubborn Denial in the main deck, down to 2, meaning he has a little bit less of that card to punish things like the One Ring here. So Jody gets to slam a lot harder than maybe he would against a traditional build of this deck.
Right, and Jody is going to slam down this One Ring, and it's looking like it's going to resolve, which is going to buy Jody a turn, get him a bunch of resources. I mean, truly just a powerful card in Modern currently, as he is going to immediately activate it, draw a card off of it, and play a land for turn.
Yeah, one thing I noticed about Jody's deck is that Jody has a lot of these Demolition and Field of Ruin effects that can destroy non-basic lands and search up basics. Now, Jarrell does actually have 3 basics in his deck, a forest and islands and a plains, but eventually we are going to start going after these tri-lands and start to make it so that our opponent, doesn't have full domain and make life a little bit more awkward.
Right, which definitely is difficult for someone on a deck like Domain Zoo to deal with. And it looks like our players are...
I think there was some confusion about if a land was played this turn, but last turn Jody cycled the Eagles of the North, played the 4th land, and played the Knight. So just a moment of probably, a little bit of small confusion there.
Sure, we'll get this sorted out very quickly as our players discuss together what happened. And this is why we always have judges on staff and nearby. And it looks like we've got it all sorted out.
Yeah. And there's no worries ever if you ever get a little confused or that sort of thing. Just take a second. Pretty easy to fix and happens to everybody.
Absolutely. Complicated game. It looks like Jarrell, still has that Ragavan, still has an Unholy Heat, I believe.
Yeah, Tribal Flames in hand for Jarrell. Can't do anything with the One Ring, but if we can get Jody low enough, it could do the last points of damage.
Absolutely. Difficult against a deck gaining so much life like Jody's is. But going to go ahead and fetch one of those basics that you were just talking about, leaving him with only 2 left in the deck.
Yeah, an interesting position there from Jarrell. Maybe didn't have the want to shock there out of fear of maybe getting pressured here pretty quickly. Something like that, but
we are going to see Ragavan just played straight up as a creature. And we're going to go back over to Jody, who's of course going to take a little bit of damage off of the ring trigger here, but is also going to get to draw 2 more cards from it. And looks like we see another Martyr, another Ring, a Thraben Inspector, plus the 3 cards that Jarrell already knows about.
Yeah, and Jody does have Winds of Abandon in hand. That is the 2-mana Past Exile that you can overload in order to get all the creatures. So Jody basically just has a bunch of ways to stall and then a bunch of ways to kill Jarrell's creatures. And, Jarrell does have 20 creatures in his deck, but I think Jody has 20-something removal spells. So it's going to be a long game here for Jarrell.
Yeah, this feels like such a dominant position for Jody to be in at this stage of the game as he plays down a temporary lockdown, which is, of course, going to take both of Jarrell's creatures.
Yeah, we see Jody fetching. I'm curious to see, is he wanting to play something like Martyr this turn? Maybe a Thraben to, pop the clue, draw some more cards? Or is he interested in maybe starting to Field of Ruin down some of these non-basic lands here?
Yeah, it looks like he is going to go for the Martyr here. As Jarrell is also going to go ahead and fetch out a land. Now this feels like such a position where Jody is in such control of the game. And I know the Domain Zoo deck has a lot of great cards in it, but Mason, do you think there's any outs Jarrell can reasonably get to retake control here?
Well, there's no, I think, one card that's going to take over the game. Jody has the Haywire Mite to cover the Leyline plus Scion and Draco interaction, so we're going to need multiple of those. But if we can get something like a Territorial Kavu down and start maybe, rummaging through our deck and just, turn our lands into spells and just basically not fill out, then that's going to be the best route to victory here for Jarrell. But with the One Ring going against Jody's deck, it's pretty hard to actually, keep up with those cards given all the life gain as well. So it's going to take, I think a bunch of turns in a row of Jarrell presenting real problems.
Sure, and we do see the Leyline in his hand as he is fetching out a Breeding Pool, it looks like, and is going to shock it in.
Yeah, one thing about Jarrell's deck that is a benefit here is that one creature, they typically hit really hard or they're Ragavan and they're giving you extra cards, right? So it only takes one creature being on the board for a couple turns to do something. It's just a matter of getting that one there into play.
Absolutely. He's going to go ahead and play that Brawler down. And then it looks like we are seeing the Leyline hit the field as well. I'm going to go back over to Jody, going to take a little bit more damage off the ring. But of course, we know he has an additional ring if he wants to draw a few cards, replay, reset the ring. That's always open to him.
Yeah, I think we might see Jody just draw 3 cards with the ring, and then, we can just keep waiting on this Martyr because we're still at 20 life, So we can just eventually pop all of these, gain, 15-ish life, and get very close to that Amir the Sky Ruin bringing stuff back. And, the Shova Brawler is big, but Jody has things that can answer it.
Right, and it looks like Jody is going to activate the Martyr, reveal just a ton of cards.
Yeah, looks like 6 white cards. It's going to gain 18 life, so Jody's going to be up to 38.
Yeah, just such a strong position, as, you know, even playing with his hand revealed, you know, he just has so many choices here, so many answers, and it feels like it's getting harder and harder for Jarrell to string together those turns that get him there. But his deck is definitely not out of options.
Yeah.
As the knight comes down for Jody.
We're also seeing how confident Jody feels about stuff, because he's not in a rush to do anything, right? And he's even like playing some of his white cards that he could try to hold for the Martyr on the next turn, because he knows he's just going to draw so many more with the One Ring. And he knows eventually he'll draw a Myriad of the Sky Ruin and just buy back the Martyr every turn, reveal all these cards over and over again. And then, just also start buying back our creatures, so we eventually just start attacking.
Yeah, I mean, a tough spot to be in for sure. As we go back over to Jarrell, who is going to go ahead and play out a Kavu, which, definitely a strong creature. It's going to be a 5/5, has those triggered abilities whenever it attacks. And looks like Jarrell might be passing from there.
Yeah,
still thinking about it. I think it's going to go ahead and swing in with the Brawler.
Yeah. And if this is a sign of the times, nothing is, because Jody could have traded for the Brawler, and we've seen him snap trade every single time this game. Very quickly was like, yeah, I'll take 5.
Yeah, not such a difficult proposition when he's already at 38 life. Not even with the 3 damage from the ring, he's still at 30 life. He has 20 life up on Jarrell.
And I love this play from Jody. Jarrell left up a blue mana. He's just going to Demolition Field down that land, get another basic from his deck. He has a Myriad of the Sky Ruin online now. And now if Jarrell does have one of his Stubborn Denials, it won't be a problem, because Jody can just, play in main phase 2.
Yeah, very, very powerful position here from Jody, as Jarrell gets out a Plains, which is the last basic land in his deck. Has 2 mana available to him in this phase, at least. We're going to see the Haywire might come down for Jody. It's going to go ahead and just get rid of that ley line, gain Jody even more life.
Oh, thank goodness, he was getting kind of low. Oof.
Yeah, it was scary. He was about to drop below 30. We would hate to see that. But it looks like he's going to go ahead and swing with his creatures as well.
Yeah, and that is an uh-oh moment if you're Jarrell. You're like, well, my Kavu is still bigger than your 3/3, so what's going on here? And this might be a moment of where Jody's going to maybe answer the board.
Right, as Jarrell's going to go ahead and read some of these cards here, make sure he understands what's happening. He's going to go ahead and block that knight, take the damage from the Thraben Inspector, go down into the single digits for his life total. And we're just going to see a Wrath from Jody.
And you're noticing not activating the ring. That's because Jody still has 5 cards in hand. So what we're probably going to see is an end of turn, activate the ring, draw 4 cards, lose 4 life. Then our main phase, maybe even draw 5 cards, and just try to get that Myriad down on the board as soon as possible.
Sure, and for Jarrell, we're just going to see him play the Gigantha, say go ahead. Jody's going to draw his 4 cards before his turn, draw his card for turn, dip into the 20s on the life total, down to 28 off the ring trigger. But a lot of options available to Jody right now.
And it looks like Jody is going to Winds of Abandon this Gigantha. Let Jarrell go get a basic. But he is out of basics now.
Right, which seems like Jarrell is aware of. It's just going to shuffle up, look through.
And now I think what we have from Jody is a double Abiding Grace in hand. And Abiding Grace, we haven't seen this card before. It's from Modern Horizons 1. It's a 3-mana enchantment that has 2 modes. At your end step, you can either gain a life or return target creature with mana value 1 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And that is going to probably get back things like Martyr Sands and Thraben Inspector. And you can sort of start to see the wheels going on Jody's deck as he runs away with this game.
Yeah, just a lot of recursion in this deck. And, you know, when the ring is, you know, this high up already, so many options just constantly available to him. And we're going to see another Martyr come down.
If I'm Jarrell, once I sort of see this loop start to be presented, you've got to wonder if you just need to pick them up for game 2 and 3 to make sure you have the time, because Jody's deck will win. And it's, you know, I think Jody's under bigger pressure of getting decked by himself than he is dying to Jarrell.
Sure, definitely a tough decision when you are at an event like the RC. You know, you're doing well. You don't want to concede early and figure out you actually could have gotten out of it. But also clock management, a very serious part. What's going on here, as now Jody is able to just start blowing up Jarrell's lands as there are no basics left for him to retrieve.
Yeah, and I think this is a spot where Jarrell's probably, even though he knows the deck list because it's open deck list, this is such a unique style of deck here from Jody. He might be trying to get a little information or see how Jody wants to play. So you do see the second Abiding Grace come down.
And we're going to see the second ring from Jody to go ahead and reset the counter, get him a turn of protection that definitely needs. And it looks like a couple of Tribal Flames in Jarrell's hand, but probably not enough to really get him there.
Yeah.
So is that 3? Is that 3 Tribal Flames?
Yeah, that might have been why Jarrell was waiting, was hoping that the one ring would get him down, you know, but with Jody blowing up the domain lands as well, those Tribal Flames were much more like lightning bolts at that point, and it's going to be pretty hard to deploy them all in time.
Right, yeah, and that was really just an excellent display of how these control decks can, you know, establish control and take over, and those main deck lockdowns, putting a lot of work in against the Zoo deck. Now, how do you think things are going to feel post-board? Any better for either of our players?
I think things probably are pretty going to like stay the same for Jody. The matchup seems to be one that he's pretty favored in. Jarrell might have a few cards that he can bring in that will help a little bit, but I doubt he has many tools for this matchup exactly, and he can't play anything that's going to interact with the Mirror of the Sky Ruin, really. So once we hit those late games again, Abiding Grace and the Mirror are probably going to take over. So it's really about Jody getting to that mid game. That's where he'll thrive.
Well, we're going to see if Jody's able to get to that mid game. We are ready for game number 2, which we are going to take you to right now. And this time we're going to have Jarrell on the play. Looks like he's looking at a hand. This might be a mull to 5.
Yeah, this is a mull. And I think, yeah, Jarrell brought in Legions in as a way to maybe hopefully snag some of these recursive creatures and get them all out of the way.
All right, we've got Legions in. Is that a Flusterstorm and a Leyline Binding?
Yep, those are the cards. Notably, no pressure here for Jarrell. He is going to need some quickly because we talked about with Jody. Jody's goal is to make it, you know, to turn 5 and be at about 10 life. You know, if Jody does that, he's going to be feeling pretty good in the average game. So Jarrell not having pressure he might have some amount of disruption, but Jody, isn't going to fold to light disruption. He needs that pressure to back it up.
Yeah, and very difficult on a mold of 5, but a Ragavan off the top, that could be the kind of pressure that Jarrell needs right now.
Yeah, that's a good draw right here. And Jarrell is now going to get dashing in. And we know Jody's deck is full of 1-mana cards, and even just little creatures that, can nickel and dime Jody, that nickel and diming does matter.
Right. Huge draw for Jarrell. He's going to dash in the Ragavan, swing it into Jody. We're going to see if we're going to get this Ragavan trigger or not. It looks like we're going to evoke a Solitude, pitching Eagles of the North to get rid of that Ragavan. That is bad news for Jarrell, who's now hoping to draw more pressure off the top.
Yeah, Jody, I think being like, hey, I've got a hand that's pretty good at like beating most of the other things. I think if you had a Scion, you would have played it. So
yeah, we're going to go back over to Jarrell here. He's got a hand full of answers, but no pressure just yet.
Yeah, and I think Jarrell, really showing some weakness here. Jody, as someone who's played a lot of Magic, is going to pick up on that. Definitely has played this matchup before. He's been playing this mono white modern deck for a while, and Domain is a popular deck. So he's going to be like, wait, why is Jarrell not doing anything? He's got a bunch of answer cards. All right, well, let's see if I can maneuver around those, and let's see if he's able to.
Sure, as we do see a Knight and a Haywire Might in his hand, and a Thraben Inspector.
Yeah, kind of a tough one there. Thraben Inspector, not the most inspiring draw you've ever seen, but it does stop things like Ragavan. And then, once again, Jody's just trying to get to the point where he... it looks like there's just some thinking about what kind of mana we're going to float. Jody's just trying to get to the point of the game where he is able to just, play all of his cards every turn, gain a bunch of life. So Thraben Inspector, while not, a card that you might be like over the moon typically to see in your modern deck or off the top here as we're starting to get into the mid game, one that's actually pretty nice here for Jody.
Yeah, and getting in on these lands early, blowing up for Jarrell. I mean, that's one of 3 basics already. Thraben Inspector going to come down on the side of Jody here. And we're going to go back over to Jarrell, who's still looking for some amount of pressure.
Yeah, I think it's a tough spot here. Like, do you put the Gigantha in your hand to try and draw the lane for the next turn to have pressure? But if you do, is that going to open up Jody with something on the Flusterstorm? Obviously, Fluster kind of at its best in this matchup when protecting your creatures from things like Wrath of God. So I like this play a lot from Jarrell. Realizes, hey, I need to get some amount of pressure in hand. Yeah, maybe he resolves some spell, but if I don't have this, I probably can't close the door.
Yeah, and it's like we're going to go back over to Jody, which, at the start of the game, we said Jody's goal is to get to turn 5 with 10 life, and we're almost there as he's playing a Knight and going through his deck to fetch a creature.
Yeah, 10 life, empty board. Feeling pretty good if you're Jody.
Right, and going to go ahead and play Thraben Inspector. Pass over to Jarrell, who's going to fetch at the end of Jody's turn.
Yeah. Jarrell does have a Legion's End in hand, which can clear up these Thraben Inspectors whenever we get a throw on the board. So those won't be very good chump blockers in the long term.
Right, which it looks like he has fetched a black mana source here. We might see just that sort of play from him. Looks like he is going over to the Legion's End and is casting it on the Thraben Inspectors.
Yeah, I really like this play from Jarrell in a long-term perspective. In the short term, you might be thinking you've got to get the 5/5 down like we were talking about. But Jody probably has a ton of kill spells in hand, and now Jarrell gets to see them with the Legion end as well. And so you know your Giganta is not long for this world because you haven't presented many things that need an answer. So Legion end only gets the copies in hand and in the graveyard and in play. So we don't get to search the deck like some of those other extraction effects. But now we know we have Winds of Abandon, which means, we know this Giganta is not long for the world if we can't protect it with something like the Flusterstorm.
Right. So great patience from Jarrell there. Great discipline. Let's go back over to Jody, who's going to quickly get to his combat step and attack in with the Knight. And Jarrell's just going to take that damage.
I like this a lot from Jody. He's like, hey, I need to start pressuring you. I'm the control deck. That's typically how I lose, is like, can't pressure you enough, and then you eventually stick something. So let me attack here. I've got the one ring, so I won't be able to get pressured back. And we see Jarrell sort of stuck with some answers in hand, but nothing that can cleanly answer the one ring.
Right. And one ring on the battlefield, giving Jody that protection, going to refill his hand easily. And it looks like Jarrell's calling for a judge.
I think I know what's going on here. So Jarrell has a Leyline Binding in hand, and Jody is the One Ring. So we're probably going to be asking the question of, if we activate the One Ring and I Leyline Binding, does Jody get the card or not? And my understanding, and I'm not a judge, is that we check last known information. So since the counter is part of the trigger, we would not get the one card. Obviously, the judge will tell you the exact answer, and we'll see from Jarrell here in a second. But I also think this is a situation where Jody probably knows, like, oh, this is a Leyline Binding-esque card in hand. There's something going on here. And I'm going to be curious to see if Jody just passes the turn and does that at the end of Jarrell's turn to kind of tie up the mana.
Sure. And of course, Jody also has that Haywire Might in hand for the Leyline. But we're going to get this judge question sorted quickly and then back into the game. But this is definitely, while it's looking pretty good for Jody, and like we were just saying, he's getting to turn 5 with more life than really needed. It's definitely not the same kind of steamroll that we saw in game 1. Jarrell still could definitely hit some of his bigger threats and answer some of these problems from Jody, and he's still very much in this game.
Speaking of answering some problems, I want to give a big shout out to one of our sponsors of the stream today, Heavy Play. You can use code Denver 2024 to get 10% off their products. They're helping sponsor the coverage here, letting us bring this Magic action to you.
All right, so it looks like our judge question is now resolved from Jarrell. And he's just thinking about how exactly he wants to do this. He's got the Flusterstorm in hand. He's got the Leyline Binding.
Yeah, if I'm Jarrell, I want to fetch in response to the One Ring being on the stack. That way Jody can't tap in response.
Right. So he is fetching now with the One Ring on the stack. It looks like Jarrell's making sure that he has domain, which he does.
Yeah, the real question to me is, does Jarrell have a white land that isn't the plains that he can fetch in order to do this? Because if he fetches this plains, that means we're going to be losing domain sooner than later. But I think this might be a situation where, to get our extra basic on our deck, we might have sacrificed one of the white shock lands that Windswept Heath can grab, which is
sure. Yeah, and it looks like we've got the plains now. Just doing some double checks, some math. And it looks like Jarrell might be letting the ring resolve. As he plays a Leyline, targeting the One Ring. It looks like the players are trying to get a little bit of clarification. Might be a little bit of confusion here. I think Jody is going to get to draw a card off this.
Yeah, I think what's happening is, and it's hard to know because sometimes there's some, non-verbal, well, there's some, verbal things said, and we aren't able to hear that. So, can't Flusterstorm a One Ring because it's a artifact. So it's already in play. But yeah, so I think what happened is Jarrell went for like the end of turn binding, and then Jody responded and activated, which got him his 1 card.
Yeah. And it looks like we now do have the binding with the ring under it. We're going to go back over to Jarrell. We've got that all sorted. And he's just going to play out Gigantha. So over on the side of Jody here is going to play the Haywire Might, immediately deal with that Leyline binding, get the One Ring back, start drawing with it, and just get the engine going.
I'm curious to see how Jody wants to move from here. Seems like we are going to Winds of Abandon.
And it looks like we're attacking him with the Knight here. And we're getting into a dangerous spot of this game for Jarrell, which is the late game. And Jody's got a ring. He's got a creature. It's looking really good for him. And Jarrell also has all of his basics on the board right now. He's just going to pass with 2 Flusterstorms and a Legion's in hand.
Yeah, this is not the recipe for success that Jarrell needs. He needs those creatures. And, went to mulligan to 5, decided to, keep that just so that we sort of had some cards and hope to draw off the top. But, didn't end up working out that way so far. Not 100% out of it yet, but definitely on the back foot.
Yeah, definitely on the back foot here. And starting to get his lands destroyed, as again, he is out of basics in the deck. And we see the Martyr and the Lockdown and an Apparition for Jody. He's going to go ahead and play the Martyr. And it looks like that's going to be it as he passes over to Jarrell. Jarrell's going to go ahead and Legion's in the Martyr, which Jody's going to go ahead and activate, gain 6 life. And Jarrell just says go with a bolt in hand.
Yeah, and because the Martyr was sacrificed, it goes to the graveyard still, which is one of the struggles with Legion's End here, is that, you do not get all of the Martyrs like you normally would.
Yeah, absolutely. Looks like Haywire Might, Solitude, Wrath in the hand for Jody, along with the Lockdown and the Apparition. Gonna swing in with the Knight there. Take Jarrell down to 3. And Jarrell needs a lot in a very small amount of time, whereas Jody easily refilling his hand, blowing up lands, really putting Jarrell's back up against the wall.
Yeah, Jarrell just did not have the mixture. And with a deck like Domain Zoo, you need that mixture of clock plus disruption. And we had some light disruption, but not exactly ones that lined up particularly well with Jody. And we just didn't have that clock. Despite drawing the Ragavan, the turn one Solitude from Jody really cleaned that one up. And nothing that Jarrell can really do against the Solitude either. That is one of the removal spells that he is not equipped to fight over.
Right, and Jarrell drawing into what looked to be a prismatic ending. So more answers, still just not quite what he needs when he needs it. It's going to take care of the knight, though. And is going to pass over to Jody.
Yeah. We're also seeing Jody sacrifice that knight, so that's why it's in the graveyard. Jarrell can't cast any more non-creature spells. It is a tough position.
Right, and, you know, bolt in hand for Jarrell, but no red sources on board. And you have to imagine Jody knows, I mean, open deck lists, that there's no mountain to be found. He can blow up these lands with impunity, and there's not going to be any red cards that can interfere with them at all.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to draw 4 cards off of the ring here.
And there it is, Niall, the Emeria the Sky Ruin.
Huge card. He's going to go ahead and play the knight, though. Fetch out another martyr. And this is just gotta spell the end for Jarrell. Jody just playing as many cards as he can, trying to discard as little as possible at the end of turn here, and passing over to Jarrell. And the ley line is just not going to do it, I'm afraid.
Jarrell trying to cast I can't actually cast can't cast, excuse me, they're all green as well. So Jarrell's going to get the ley line in play, but Jody says, no, you can't even have this. As you know, Jarrell knows that he is beaten here.
All right, and seems Jody knows it too, as we're going over to his turn. He's got a wide board. Jarrell's tapped out, offering the handshake. That is game. Jody Keith is our winner. He'll be 3-0 going into the 4th round. Now, Mason, we have seen a lot of very exciting games of Magic today. What are your thoughts about how this RC is shaping up?
Yeah, there's a lot to explore in Modern. You know, we saw the metagame breakdown. We saw 21% Rhinos, 12% Yawgmoth, and then every other deck after that kind of dropping a little bit of representation. But there's a lot of different things that can succeed and do well in Modern. It is a wide open field, and when you know your targets, you can kind of bring some unorthodox things in order to attack these. Everyone knew Rhinos and Yawg. These are the decks I have to beat. It's been interesting to see in these early rounds how the players have been going about doing that, and I'm excited to see how it develops later in the day with our other casters.
Absolutely. I'm very excited as well to see how this RC develops, not only today, but also tomorrow, where we bring more rounds and go into our top 8. Before we take a break, I think we have another giveaway from the sponsors of this stream, Heavy Play.
Yep. You can get in this with Heavy Play in chat. Just type that there. Heavy Play has amazing products like deck boxes and play mats. Those play mats you see in our feature match area are Heavy Play mats. They are sponsoring the stream this weekend to help bring coverage to y'all and give back to the community. So if you want to try out their products, you can go to their website on screen and use code Denver2024 to get 10% off this weekend.
Yeah, and we are going to, here in a minute, just take a short break, and then we are going to swap over to some of the other casters on our team for this weekend. Mason, it has been an absolute pleasure commentating these first 3 rounds with you. I can't wait to watch how the rest of these go and how the ones tomorrow go as well.
Yep. I'll see y'all on Twitch chat.
This is the Heavy Play Equip Mag.